Hi everybody, thank you. Thanks very much for coming. I'll do my prepared statement and then we'll take the questions. From the outset, we've made it clear that in relation to allegations of performance-enhancing substances, we would follow due process to ensure our game is clean. Our players and officials have been cooperating with ASADA as allegations continue to be investigated. As a result of the ongoing ASADA investigation, Sandor Earl has today been issued by the NRL with an infraction notice. This follows an interview between the player and ASADA this week in which admissions were made regarding the use and trafficking of peptide CJC 1295. Sandor has accepted an immediate provisional suspension for breaches of the league anti-doping policy. Under the rules, he can accept the penalty or elect to go to a hearing. The penalties are set by the WADA code and they will follow, in this case, in due course. Today's development highlights the seriousness of the issues involved and the thoroughness of the ongoing investigation. Drugs are not acceptable and every effort is being made to ensure the game is clean, both with the NRL Integrity Unit, our clubs, and in cooperation with ASADA. I want to make it very clear that the broader ASADA investigation is continuing and we continue to expect full compliance with its requirements. Like everyone involved in the game, we believe it needs to be brought to a clear conclusion as quickly as possible. As of today, we do not have information that warrants action against any other party. Finally, I want to assure our fans, our members, our players and our officials that there is no place for drugs in our game. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions.
When was Sandor interviewed? What day?
We got the information, the admission was made yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, but specifically we got the evidence in the last 48 hours that's allowed us to move to this point.
What's the length of suspension?
At this point in time, what we have had happen is we've had an admission of the use and trafficking of peptides. So what happens from here is that the player can elect to go to a tribunal or can elect to take the penalty that we award. That will all unfold in the next 10 days. He's got 10 days to make that election. He agreed and agreed to stand down and has subsequently been stood down.
Trafficking, is that even worse than you expected?
Look, I think I've said right from the start that the allegations were serious, that we weren't going to presume guilt, and that we needed to get it done pretty quickly. So I think this is the first example whereby we've been given facts, we have evidence, we have an admission, and the code is stepping forward, and we've issued an infraction notice. So I think I can't go into the specifics because that will unfold over the next period of time, and the penalties are very clear within the WADA code.
Is he selling to other players? I mean, what's going on?
I can't go into the specifics of the investigation and the charges. What I can tell you is that he has been charged and has made an admission for the use and trafficking of peptides.
At what time of his career, what club? Canberra, Penrith?
Look, I can't talk about the club, I'm afraid, because I am still under. There are still legal restrictions on what I can and can't say. So, and there is privacy. So, I can't specifically tell you what club it was. What I can tell you is that he's made an admission and we've issued an infraction notice.
Dave, he's going to French Rugby next year. How does this impact on that?
Well, look, I believe the WADA code applies across international football codes. Remember, at this point in time, we've stood him down to provisional suspension. There is a process that will be followed, and I've been absolutely clear that nobody will be presumed guilty and that we will follow due process, and that's what's going to happen. At that point in time, if we assume that the penalty is awarded, we would obviously, and via WADA and ASADA, we would make sure that all of the authorities are aware.
How disturbing is this for you?
It's been 7 months, and I've always said that the investigation was incredibly, the allegations of it were serious, and I think what this demonstrates is the seriousness of some of those allegations. And I've also said that we would not react other than to facts, or in this case, an admission or confession. So, it's part of a serious set of allegations. And the ASADA investigation is unfolding, and we want it to go as quickly as possible, but at the same time, it's got to be thorough, and we've got to make sure we're dealing on fact, and we've got to make sure we're giving people a fair go.
Dave, is this just the start of a lot more to come?
Look, the investigation continues, and we're working very closely. The player interviews are largely finished, and there's a subsequent set of interviews within the ASADA investigation that will unfold. So, you know, the investigation is going. There's a lot of cooperation from our players, so I think things are working according to plan. I'm very comfortable with the level of cooperation with ASADA, and we'll get to the end of it.
Should fans brace for the worst, more to come?
Well, as I said in my statement, there's no other information at this point in time. So, you know, we're working through the investigation. We've acted promptly. We've acted working with ASADA. We've issued an infraction notice. So, you know, as evidence comes to light, as facts are brought to my attention, then I'll clearly act, and I'll act strongly.
Dave, is there a possibility Sandor could have been trafficking to other NRL players?
Look, I'm not going to be specific about the details of the case or the investigation. I think what I can tell you is that there's been an admission of the use and trafficking of a specific peptide, and the investigation continues. So, you know, any evidence that relates to trafficking, wherever it may be, clearly we'll follow that through.
When you say other prohibited substances, are we talking performance-enhancing drugs? Can you be a bit more clear on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get.
Certainly, it's been related to use and trafficking of peptides, CJC 1295, and other prohibited substances. Can you be a bit specific on what the other prohibited substances were?
You know, I can't be specific. What I can tell you is the infraction notice and the charge has been laid against CJC 1295.
Why can't you be specific about the other substances?
The charge has been laid against CJC 1295. We'll work through over the next 10 days. There's a series of charges against the use and trafficking of that particular peptide. We'll work through the charges with Sandor and his lawyer over the next 10 days, and then he'll either elect to go to a tribunal or he'll elect to accept the charge of the NRL. In terms of establishing that charge, we'll work with Jim and the integrity unit to make sure we clearly understand the boundaries within the WADA code.
Dave, how does this relate to Stephen Dank?
Again, look, I can't go in specifically into the nature of the investigation. What I can tell you is pretty much what I've told you, that we have evidence around the use and trafficking. We'll follow through on all of that evidence. The player has stood down, he's been stood down, and he volunteered to stand down, and we'll work through the next 10 days and just determine whether there's a tribunal or whether he accepts the award that we'll give him.
Did he make the admission because he was presented with evidence that just couldn't be denied?
Look, the investigation's been going on for some months, and you know, I alluded to the thoroughness of it, and I know how frustrating that is for fans and members and how long this is taking, but this is the result of that investigation, you know, going its course, and as I said earlier as well, making sure that we give, you know, people, we're absolutely clear on people's rights, and we give them a fair go. So it's a result of the investigation. You know, it's not the result of one interview. It's the result of an ongoing investigation.
Dave, probably a couple of weeks ago, Sandor Earl fronted a press conference and basically said that allegations were incorrect and, you know, that they'd been basically made up. Were you surprised when he was saying those things, or is this new knowledge for you?
Oh, look, we've acted promptly. So we have an admission, and we have an admission on the use and trafficking. So we've acted very promptly. I think that's the right thing to do. Our fans and our members deserve that we act promptly. I think it demonstrates that when we do get information, you know, we are prepared to take it seriously and take it to that next stage in terms of the tribunal and award a penalty. So we've acted very promptly on the information that we've been given. It's an admission, you know, clear facts.
That you've acted on trafficking, that clearly indicates that it's related to the NRL and NRL players, doesn't it?
Well, look, what we've established is an admission of use and trafficking, and we've stood the player down as a provisional suspension. There is a process. So the fair go now is that the player has the opportunity to understand the charges laid against that admission and elect to either go to a tribunal or accept the penalty that we give. So there is a process now in the next 10 days where we need to work that through with the player concerned, and we'll do that. And we'll do that fairly, and we'll do that, you know, with integrity. The other thing is, you know, these are difficult circumstances for all involved. So there's a human being at the end of the day, and we need to make sure we look after his welfare as well.
Jim, what kind of ban will he be facing if he takes it?
Well, it's clearly stipulated, obviously, in the rules. And obviously, from a use point of view, it's obviously 2 years, and from a trafficking perspective, it's 4 years to life. So, obviously, it'll be in line with the rules.
Can you tell us where the interview process is? I mean, don't think it's finished, is it? How far away are you from finishing that first?
Early next week will be the finish of all the interviews.
And Dave mentioned there a second round of interviews. Who's that with?
So the second round of interviews is outside of the game, officials outside of the game. So it's other people involved, and ASADA, using their new powers, will embark on, continue the investigation more widely. So we finished the player interviews and the official interviews within the NRL early next week, as Jim says, and then there's a next round. And I'm not going to get into speculation. Again, I've been consistent with that, and hopefully this gives you some indication as to why that consistency and why this, you know, we follow the strategy we're following. So I'm not going to get into kind of setting dates or getting into timelines, because these are serious matters.
Dave, CJC 1295 is one of the peptides allegedly used at Cronulla. Is that club's place in the final still safe?
You know, I hope I've got the message across that we as a code, we as a commission, will deal with fact, and I think when the facts are presented, you know, we'll respond accordingly. We have facts here, we have an admission, and we're telling everybody as soon as possible. We've reacted very quickly, and I've got no information or no evidence at this point in time to suggest that there's anything further that we would be announcing in the near term. However, the investigation continues, and hopefully this gives you a sense of the seriousness and why we followed such a thorough process.
That's a clear indication then that CJC 1295 is something you consider to be banned, given this action you've taken.
Look, I think we've got a process now that we need to follow, and quite clearly when we've got information, we've got an admission, the right thing to do is to issue an infraction notice and provisionally stand down the player. We'll work through the next 10 days. If a tribunal is required, that's what will happen, and we are ready to go with that. We're pre-prepared and we're ready to go with that. If the player, through his admission, is happy with the charges that we've laid, then we'll work with the integrity unit. We'll work with ASADA and WADA to make sure that we arrive at the right penalty, such that it's fair and appropriate.
Sorry, Dave, can you just answer that question though? Like, is CJC 1295 considered to be banned by you, given the action you've taken today?
Well, we've issued an infraction notice for the use and trafficking of that particular peptide.
Has Sandor Earl reacted to the infraction?
Sorry, in what sense reaction?
Is he reacted to you, to the infraction notice?
Well, look, we've been with his lawyers today. We've been talking to Sandor over the last few days. As I said earlier, he's a human being, and we need to make sure we're covering his welfare as well. So the reaction, it's been an ongoing discussion, you know, for Sandor to make that admission, you know, quite clearly. That's a big deal, and we're making sure that we look after him.
Dave, this interview process last finished. Will you get any feedback from ASADA on what players may have said? And if there's an admission there somewhere that Cronulla was involved in taking banned substances, will you then review their position in the final?
We've been an observer in every single one of the interviews, and those interviews have progressed well. Players and officials have cooperated. I think the whole process has gone as satisfactorily as it could have. There's further work to do, as I described, in terms of the next stage from an ASADA perspective, and we'll cooperate fully, we'll work fully with ASADA to get to that next stage. If a fact is presented to me, if an infraction notice or the ability to issue an infraction notice is clearly presented and we have evidence that's substantiated and factual and stands the test of scrutiny, then of course we will act in the same way that, you know, hopefully you're getting that sense of today. So I don't have that information. The investigation continues. There's serious matters. We backed it all along in terms of its seriousness and trying to move it along as quickly as possible. And as the facts come forward, we will absolutely respond in the way that we've responded today.
Dave, how worried are you that there are even darker days ahead for rugby league?
Oh, look, I don't think in terms of worried about one thing or another. I think the fact of the matter is we've followed a process. It's been a strong process. I'm comfortable that we've done the right thing, as uncomfortable as that's felt along the way. But I think, you know, the investigation's still got a way to go, and you know, I'm not going to manage for any particular outcome. I'm going to manage for the process to be the right process, to treat players fairly, to not presume guilt, but to get it done as quickly as possible. Because, like all the fans and members, you know, this is 7 months in. So clearly, we're trying to move with as much urgency as we can. But at the same time, these are complicated things. It's not something you can solve overnight.